You have 30 seconds to tell me why I shouldn't cut every single one of you out of this fortune forever." The words hung in the air of the Myers Foundation ballroom like a death sentence. 4 faces stared back at me from the stage where they'd been celebrating their latest theft. Karen Myers, the matriarch who'd called me a gold-digging parasite. Patrick, her husband, who'd tried to buy my silence for pennies. Shannon, the daughter who'd sent me photos of her redecorating my baby's nursery. Jeffrey, the son who'd threatened to take my child away. They had no idea who they were looking at. 7 months ago, they'd thrown me out of their family estate like garbage. Tonight, I was about to destroy them with the very fortune they thought they'd stolen. You know what they say about karma. Sometimes it takes its time, but when it arrives with interest. Tonight, the bill was due, and I was the one holding the receipt. My name is Ruth Edwards, and this is the story of how I went from a grieving widow thrown out of her own home to the secret owner of a $200 million empire. How I spent 7 months watching people reveal their true colors while they had no idea I was holding all the cards. How I learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad, it's getting everything. Hello, my beautiful story family. Welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that like button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, please tell us the city or country where you're watching from, because together we are not just sharing stories, we are keeping hope and faith alive. Thank you. But before I tell you about the moment I watched 4 of the greediest people I've ever known realize they'd just lost everything, let me take you back to where this all started. Because the revenge is sweet, but the journey to get there, that's where the real story lives. I was 28 years old when I met Andrew Myers, and I thought I knew everything about love. I was wrong about that, just like I was wrong about a lot of things back then. I believed that good intentions mattered more than good strategy. I believed that family meant something beyond blood and money. I believed that when someone loved you, their family would love you too. Andrew was different from anyone I'd ever met. Not because he was wealthy, though he was. Not because he was handsome, though he definitely was. Andrew was different because he saw me. Really saw me. When I told him I was an architect, he didn't ask if I meant interior design. When I showed him my portfolio of commercial buildings I'd designed, he didn't seem surprised that a young black woman from Detroit had created something beautiful and functional and profitable. We met at a conference in Chicago. I was presenting a sustainable housing project I'd developed for low-income families. Andrew was there representing his investment firm, looking for socially responsible projects to fund. After my presentation, he walked up to me and said, "I want to fund your next 10 projects." I laughed. "You haven't even seen my business plan." "I don't need to," he said. "I can see your vision. That's worth more than any spreadsheet." That was Andrew. He made decisions with his heart, but he backed them up with his mind. Within 6 months, we were inseparable. Within a year, we were married. Within 2 years, we had Nova, our beautiful daughter who had Andrew's eyes and my stubborn streak. Andrew's family tolerated me. That's the kindest way I can put it. Karen Myers, his mother, had a way of smiling that never reached her eyes when she looked at me. She'd introduce me to her friends as Andrew's wife, like my name was too difficult to remember. Patrick, his father, was more direct in his disapproval. He'd make comments about how Andrew was going through a phase, and how these things usually work themselves out. Shannon, Andrew's sister, was the worst. She had this talent for making cutting remarks sound like compliments. "Ruth, you're so lucky Andrew doesn't care about social status," she'd say at family dinners. Most men in his position would never be so open-minded. Jeffrey, the youngest, was a lawyer who specialized in making people feel small. He'd ask me questions about my background, my education, my family's financial situation, all under the guise of getting to know his new sister-in-law. But Andrew loved me, and that was enough. He'd built his own investment firm separate from his father's traditional banking business. He was making his own money, creating his own legacy. When Nova was born, he started talking about setting up trusts, about making sure our daughter would never have to depend on anyone else's approval or acceptance. "I want her to have choices," he'd tell me while holding Nova in the nursery we'd designed together. "I want her to know she can be anything, do anything, without having to ask permission from people who think they're better than her." Andrew was building something for us. Something that would be ours, not theirs. Something that would protect Nova from the kind of conditional love his family specialized in. I should have known it was too good to last. The stroke happened on a Tuesday morning in March. Andrew was 32 years old, healthy, active, with no family history of heart disease or stroke. He'd been working late the night before, excited about a new project that would fund affordable housing in 3 different cities. He woke up that morning, kissed me goodbye, kissed Nova's forehead, and told me he'd be home early for dinner. The call came at 2:15 in the afternoon. Andrew had collapsed during a meeting. By the time I got to the hospital, he was gone. The funeral was a nightmare wrapped in expensive flowers and false sympathy. The Myers family took over everything. They planned the service, chose the music, wrote the obituary. I was treated like a guest at my own husband's funeral. Karen kept introducing me to people as Andrew's widow, like I was a temporary inconvenience that would soon be resolved. During the service, I sat in the front row holding Nova, listening to speaker after speaker talk about Andrew's potential, his bright future, his promising career. They talked about him like he was still becoming something instead of celebrating what he'd already accomplished. They talked about his family's legacy, his father's business, his place in their dynasty. Nobody mentioned the housing projects he'd funded. Nobody talked about the families who had homes because of his vision. Nobody mentioned that he'd built his own company, separate from theirs, because he wanted to create something better. After the burial, Karen pulled me aside. "Ruth, dear, we need to discuss practical matters. I know this is difficult, but Andrew's affairs need to be settled." I nodded, still numb with grief. "Of course. Whatever needs to be done." Patrick has been reviewing Andrew's finances with Jeffrey. It seems most of his assets were tied up in that little investment firm of his. Very risky ventures, I'm afraid. Not much liquid capital. I stared at her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that while Andrew was very generous with his affections, he wasn't particularly practical about financial planning. The estate will need to be liquidated to cover his debts and obligations." "What debts?" "Andrew's company was profitable. We have savings, investments." Karen's smile was patient and condescending. "Oh, sweetheart. I know Andrew liked to make you feel secure, but the reality is quite different. Men sometimes exaggerate their success to protect their wives from worry." That was the first lie. I knew Andrew's business inside and out. I'd helped him structure deals, review contracts, analyze investments. His company wasn't just profitable, it was thriving. But I was too devastated to argue, too overwhelmed to fight. 3 days after the funeral, they made their move. I was in the nursery, packing Nova's things, when Karen, Patrick, Shannon, and Jeffrey walked in. No knock, no announcement. They just appeared like a tribunal. "Ruth," Patrick said, "we've completed our review of Andrew's estate. I'm afraid the situation is worse than we initially thought." Jeffrey stepped forward with a folder. "Andrew's company has significant outstanding debts. The house is mortgaged beyond its current value. There are tax obligations that exceed the liquid assets." "What does that mean?" I asked, though I was starting to understand. Shannon answered with fake sympathy dripping from her voice. "It means you can't afford to live here anymore, Ruth. It means you need to find somewhere else to go. This is my home. This is Nova's home." "Actually," Jeffrey said, consulting his papers, "the house is owned by the Myers Family Trust. Andrew had a life estate, which terminated upon his death. You have no legal claim to the property." I felt the world tilting. "That's not possible." Andrew said a lot of things," Karen interrupted. "But legal documents don't lie. You have until the end of the week to remove your personal belongings." "Where am I supposed to go?" "I have a baby." Patrick's voice was cold. "That's not our responsibility, Ruth. You're a capable woman. I'm sure you'll figure something out. Andrew would never have left us with nothing." Shannon laughed. "Andrew was a dreamer, Ruth. He lived in a fantasy world where good intentions paid the bills. This is reality." "You're lying." The words came out stronger than I felt. "You're all lying." Jeffrey stepped closer. "Are you calling me a liar, Ruth? Are you suggesting that I, as a licensed attorney, would misrepresent legal documents?" "I'm suggesting that you're stealing from your dead brother." The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Karen's mask finally slipped. "How dare you? How dare you stand in our family home and accuse us of theft? You came into this family with nothing. You contributed nothing. You are nothing. And now that Andrew isn't here to protect you from reality, you're going to learn exactly what nothing looks like." "Get out," Patrick said. "Get out of our house. Take your bastard child and get out." I looked at each of their faces. Karen's cold satisfaction. Patrick's disgust. Shannon's barely contained glee. Jeffrey's legal precision. These people had sat at my dinner table. They'd held my daughter. They'd smiled and nodded and played the part of family while planning this moment. Fine, I said. We'll go. Smart choice, Shannon said. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I packed what I could carry and left that afternoon. Nova cried the entire drive to the small apartment I'd rented across town. I cried too, but quietly so she wouldn't hear. That night, after I'd put Nova to bed in her portable crib, I sat on the floor of our empty living room and called Andrew's personal lawyer, David Chun. Not the family lawyer, not Jeffrey, but the man Andrew had hired to handle his private affairs. Ruth, David said when he answered. I've been trying to reach you. We need to meet. They threw us out, David. They said Andrew left us nothing. Ruth, listen to me very carefully. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? And don't tell anyone you're coming. Not anyone. The next morning, I sat across from David's desk while Nova played with toys in her carrier. David looked tired, like he hadn't slept. Ruth, I need you to understand something. What the Myers family told you about Andrew's estate, it's not just wrong. It's deliberately false. What do you mean? David opened a file. 2 months before he died, Andrew updated his will. He also restructured his assets to protect them from exactly what his family just did to you. I don't understand. Andrew left you everything, Ruth. His entire personal fortune. The investment firm, the real estate holdings, the liquid assets, everything. You're not broke. You're worth approximately $200 million. The words didn't make sense. I heard them, but they felt like they were coming from underwater. That's impossible. It's not only possible, it's documented, witnessed, and legally binding. Andrew suspected his family might try something like this if anything happened to him. He protected you and Nova. Then why didn't you stop them? Why didn't you tell them? David leaned forward. Because Andrew's instructions were very specific. If his family tried to defraud you, I was to let them. He wanted to see how far they'd go. He wanted you to see who they really were. He wanted me to suffer? No, Ruth. He wanted you to have a choice. He wanted you to decide, with full knowledge of their character, how to handle your inheritance. I stared at the legal documents David spread across his desk. Bank statements showing accounts I didn't know existed. Property deeds with my name on them. Investment portfolios worth more money than I'd ever imagined. What am I supposed to do with this? That's entirely up to you. You could claim your inheritance today. You could move back into the house, which Andrew actually owned outright and left to you. You could expose their lies and take control of everything immediately. Or you could wait. You could let them think they've won. You could watch what they do when they believe you're powerless. I looked down at Nova, sleeping peacefully in her carrier. She had no idea that her father had left her a fortune. She had no idea that her grandparents had just tried to steal it. How long could I wait? As long as you want. The inheritance doesn't expire. But Ruth, you need to understand what you'd be choosing. If you wait, if you let them think they've succeeded, they might do worse things. They might try to take Nova. They might try to destroy your reputation. They might commit actual crimes thinking you can't stop them. I thought about Karen's cold smile, Patrick's disgust, Shannon's cruelty, Jeffrey's legal threats. What would Andrew want me to do? David smiled sadly. Andrew would want you to be happy. But he also said something else when he set this up. He said, if they show Ruth who they really are, I trust her to show them who she really is. I made my decision that day. I told David to keep the inheritance secret. I would wait. I would watch. I would let the Myers family reveal exactly how far their greed and cruelty could take them. I had no idea how far that would be. But I was about to find out. The apartment I rented was a far cry from the Myers estate. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. In a neighborhood where people minded their own business and didn't ask questions about why a young mother with a baby might need to start over. The walls were thin, the carpet was old, and the kitchen barely fit 1 person. But it was mine, and more importantly, it was temporary. I had $200 million sitting in accounts I could access with a phone call. Instead, I was learning to live on the small savings Andrew and I had kept separate from his main assets. About $30,000 that would last me maybe 6 months if I was careful. The irony wasn't lost on me. Nova adapted better than I did. At 8 months old, she didn't understand that we'd lost everything. She didn't know that her nursery with the hand-painted murals and custom furniture had been given to someone else. She just knew that Mama was there, and that was enough. I wasn't adapting as well. Every morning I woke up angry. Not just sad, not just grieving, but furious. The Myers family had looked me in the eye and lied. They'd used my grief against me. They'd counted on my shock and devastation to make me compliant. But David Chen's words kept echoing in my head. Andrew had anticipated this. He'd known his family well enough to predict exactly what they'd do. The question was whether I was strong enough to see it through. The first test came 2 weeks after we'd moved out. I was feeding Nova when my phone buzzed with a text from Shannon. No greeting, no pretense of concern. Just a photo. It was Nova's old nursery. But it wasn't empty like I'd expected. Shannon had redecorated it completely. The soft yellows and greens Andrew and I had chosen were gone, replaced with harsh pinks and purples. The rocking chair where I'd nurse Nova every night was gone. The bookshelf Andrew had built by hand was gone. Even the mobile we'd bought together was replaced with something gaudy and expensive. The text that followed was worse than the photo. Thought you'd want to see how much better the room looks now. Some spaces just need the right touch. I stared at that message for 10 minutes. Shannon had deliberately destroyed every trace of Nova's first home and then sent me pictures to make sure I knew it. This wasn't about redecorating. This was about erasing us. I started to type a response, then deleted it. Then typed another one and deleted that too. Finally, I put the phone down and picked up Nova instead. Your Aunt Shannon is a very small person, I told my daughter. And small people do small things to feel big. Nova gurgled and grabbed my finger. She didn't care about nurseries or decorating or the cruelty of people who should have loved her. She just cared that I was there. That's when I realized something important. The Myers family thought they were punishing me, but they were actually giving me information. Every cruel text, every dismissive comment, every calculated insult was showing me exactly who they were when they thought I couldn't fight back. I decided to start documenting everything. The phone calls started a few days later. Karen would call every few days, always around Nova's nap time, always with the same tone of false concern. Ruth, dear, how are you managing? I know this transition must be so difficult. We're fine, Karen. Thank you for asking. Are you sure? Because Patrick and I were discussing your situation, and we're worried about Nova. That neighborhood you're in, it's not exactly safe for a child. It's perfectly safe. Well, if you say so. But if you ever feel like you can't provide properly for Nova, we want you to know that we're here. Family takes care of family. The subtext was clear. They were building a case. Every phone call was designed to get me to admit I was struggling, that I couldn't provide for Nova, that I needed their help. They were creating a record of my supposed inadequacy. I started recording the calls. That's very kind of you, Karen, but Nova and I are doing wonderfully. I'm actually amazed at how well we're managing on our own. Oh, well, that's good to hear. The disappointment in her voice was unmistakable. She wanted me to be failing. She needed me to be desperate. Patrick's approach was different. He'd show up unannounced, always with some excuse about being in the neighborhood. He'd look around the apartment with obvious distaste, making comments about the modest accommodations, and asking pointed questions about my finances. Ruth, I hope you're being realistic about your long-term prospects. A woman in your position, with a child to support, you need to think practically. What do you mean? I mean you're young, you're attractive, you're intelligent. You could find someone to take care of you and Nova. Someone stable. The first time he said it, I thought I'd misunderstood. The second time, I realized Patrick Myers was essentially suggesting I find a new husband to solve my financial problems. Like I was a commodity that needed to be remarketed. I'm not looking for someone to take care of us, Patrick. We're taking care of ourselves. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're barely getting by. Looks can be deceiving. Indeed they can. Jeffrey's harassment was more professional, but no less cruel. He'd send me legal documents to review, always with urgent deadlines, always requiring my signature for something related to Andrew's estate. Most of it was meaningless paperwork designed to keep me confused and compliant, but some of it was more sinister. One document was particularly interesting. It was a waiver of any future claims against the Myers family estate. Jeffrey presented it as a formality, something that would clean up loose ends and provide closure for everyone. I read it carefully. If I signed it, I would be giving up any right to challenge their version of Andrew's will. I would be legally acknowledging that Andrew had left me nothing and that I had no claim to any Myers family assets. This seems unnecessary, Jeffrey. If Andrew really left me nothing, then I have nothing to waive. It's just a precaution, Ruth. Legal housekeeping. I'll need to have my own lawyer review it. Jeffrey's expression shifted slightly. That seems like an unnecessary expense for someone in your financial position. I'll manage. Ruth, I'm trying to help you here. This document protects you as much as it protects us. It prevents any future misunderstandings. What kind of misunderstandings? The kind that could get expensive for everyone involved. There it was. The threat wrapped in legal language. Sign this or face the consequences. I didn't sign it. The real betrayal came from someone I'd trusted completely. Tiffany Morrison had been my best friend since college. She was the maid of honor at my wedding, Nova's godmother, the person I called when I needed to cry or laugh or just talk. When Andrew died, Tiffany was one of the first people at my door with food and tissues and offers to help with anything I needed. So when she called 3 weeks after I'd moved into the apartment, I was genuinely happy to hear from her. Ruth, honey, how are you holding up? Some days are better than others. But we're managing. I've been thinking about you constantly, and I have an idea that might help. What kind of idea? Well, you know my friend Marcus from work. The one who owns those restaurants. I knew Marcus. 50-something, recently divorced, the kind of man who wore expensive watches and talked about his net worth at dinner parties. What about him? He's been asking about you. Ever since Andrew's funeral, he's been asking if you're okay, if you need anything. That's nice of him. Ruth, I think he's interested. Romantically interested. I almost dropped the phone. Tiffany, Andrew's been dead for a month. I know. It's too soon to think about dating. But Marcus isn't just any guy. He's successful, he's stable, he's good with kids. And Ruth, let's be honest, you need stability right now. I need my friend to support me, not pimp me out to her co-workers. That's not what I'm doing. I'm looking out for you. Marcus could take care of you and Nova. You wouldn't have to worry about money or housing or any of this stress. I don't want to be taken care of, Tiffany. I want to take care of myself. With what? Ruth, be realistic. You have no income, no assets, no prospects. You're living in a tiny apartment in a questionable neighborhood with a baby. How long do you think you can keep this up? The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Tiffany becoming increasingly insistent that I at least meet Marcus for coffee. She painted a picture of my life that was desperate and unsustainable, and positioned Marcus as my salvation. I finally agreed to think about it just to end the call. 2 days later, I found out what Tiffany was really up to. Marcus called me directly. Not to ask me out, but to discuss business. Ruth, Tiffany tells me you might be interested in a mutually beneficial arrangement. I'm sorry, what? She explained your situation. Young widow, financial difficulties, need for stability. I'm prepared to offer you a very generous monthly allowance in exchange for companionship. My blood turned to ice. Companionship? Nothing inappropriate, of course. Social events, dinner dates, someone to travel with occasionally. You'd have your own place, a car, an account for Nova's expenses. Very discreet, very comfortable. And what does Tiffany get out of this arrangement? A finder's fee. Standard practice in these situations. I hung up without another word. Tiffany had tried to sell me. My best friend, Nova's godmother, the woman who'd held my hand at Andrew's funeral, had literally tried to broker a deal to turn me into some rich man's kept woman. And she was going to profit from it. When she called back an hour later, I was ready. Ruth, did Marcus reach out? I think you two would really hit it off. Tiffany, did you tell Marcus I was available for purchase? What? Ruth, that's not. I just thought. You thought you could make money off my grief. You thought you could turn my dead husband into a business opportunity. Ruth, you're being dramatic. I was trying to help. No, you were trying to help yourself. To a commission on selling your desperate friend to the highest bidder. That's not fair. You know what's not fair? Having your best friend treat you like damaged goods that need to be moved quickly before they lose all their value. I hung up and blocked her number. That night, after Nova was asleep, I sat in my small living room and realized something important. The Myers family wasn't the only one who saw me as weak and desperate. Even people who claimed to love me were treating me like I was broken, like I needed to be rescued, like I couldn't possibly take care of myself and my daughter. They were all wrong. But more importantly, They were all revealing exactly who they were when they thought I had no power to stop them. I called David Chin the next morning. David, I want to set up a small trust fund for Nova. Something visible, something that shows I'm not completely destitute, but nothing that reveals the full inheritance. How much are you thinking? $1 million. Enough to stop any custody challenges, enough to show I can provide for her, but not enough to make them suspicious about where the money came from. That's smart, Ruth. It'll give you legal protection without showing your hand. Good, because I have a feeling things are about to get much worse before they get better. I was right about that. The trust fund announcement changed everything. I had David release the information strategically. Not a press release or public announcement. Just the kind of legal filing that people in certain circles would notice. $1 million set aside for Nova Edwards' education and welfare, managed by a reputable firm, funded by private family assets. The Myers family's reaction was swift and telling. Karen called within hours of the filing becoming public record. Her voice had a new edge to it, sharper than her usual condescending sweetness. Ruth, darling, we just heard the most interesting news about a trust fund for Nova. Yes, I wanted to make sure she was provided for. How thoughtful. And expensive. We had no idea Andrew had left you with such resources. Andrew was very thorough in his planning. There was a long pause. I could practically hear Karen's mind working, recalculating everything she thought she knew about my situation. Well, that certainly changes things, doesn't it? Perhaps we should meet to discuss Nova's future more comprehensively. What do you mean? I mean that if there are assets we weren't aware of, the family should be involved in decisions about how they're managed. For Nova's sake, of course. Of course. It was never about Nova. It was about the money they thought they'd missed. Patrick's approach was more direct. He showed up at my apartment the next evening, uninvited and clearly agitated. Ruth, we need to talk. About what? About this trust fund. About where that money came from. I led him into the small living room, curious to see how far he'd push. I don't understand your concern, Patrick. It's Nova's money for Nova's future. $1 million doesn't just appear out of nowhere, Ruth. If Andrew had that kind of liquid capital, it should have been disclosed during the estate settlement. Maybe your estate settlement wasn't as thorough as you thought. Patrick's face reddened. Are you suggesting we missed something? That Jeffrey, a licensed attorney, failed to identify significant assets. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying that Andrew was very good at planning ahead. Where did the money come from, Ruth? That's really none of your business. It absolutely is our business. If there are undisclosed assets from Andrew's estate, the family has a right to know about them. I looked at Patrick carefully. This man had thrown me out of my home, called my daughter a bastard, and spent weeks trying to convince me I was destitute. Now he was demanding information about money he thought he was entitled to. The trust fund is legal, properly documented, and none of your concern. Everything involving Andrew's legacy is our concern. Then you should have been more concerned about his legacy when he was alive. Patrick stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. Don't get clever with me, Ruth. You're playing games you don't understand with people who have resources you can't imagine. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. You think $1 million makes you untouchable? You think that little trust fund protects you from the consequences of crossing this family. I think Nova's trust fund protects her from people who would steal from a baby. Patrick's mask slipped completely. You have no idea what you're dealing with. No idea what we're capable of when someone tries to steal from us. I'm not stealing anything from you. Aren't you? That money came from somewhere, Ruth. And if it came from assets that should have been part of Andrew's estate, then you're a thief. Get out of my apartment. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Get out, or I'll call the police and tell them you're threatening me and my daughter. Patrick left, but his parting look promised this was just the beginning. I was right. 3 days later, Jeffrey called with news that made my blood run cold. Ruth, I'm calling as a courtesy to inform you that the family has decided to pursue legal action regarding Nova's custody. What? We've filed a petition with the court requesting a review of Nova's living situation and your fitness as a guardian. I sat down hard on my couch. On what grounds? On the grounds that your financial instability, questionable living conditions, and recent erratic behavior suggest you may not be able to provide adequate care for a minor child. That's insane. Nova is perfectly cared for. Is she? You're living in a substandard apartment in a questionable neighborhood. You have no steady income. You've been making suspicious financial moves that suggest possible illegal activity. The trust fund is completely legal. The trust fund is evidence of undisclosed assets that you've been hiding from the estate settlement. That's fraud, Ruth. That's not fraud, that's planning. We'll let the court decide. In the meantime, we're requesting supervised visitation only until the matter is resolved. You can't take my daughter away from me. We're not taking her away. We're protecting her from an unstable situation while the adults sort out the legal complications you've created. I hung up and immediately called David Chin. David, they're trying to take Nova. I heard. Jeffrey filed the paperwork this morning. Can they do this? They can try. But Ruth, this is exactly what Andrew was worried about. They're using the legal system to pressure you into revealing your assets or giving up your rights. What do? You have options. You could reveal the full inheritance right now. That would end the custody challenge immediately. Or you could fight them with what you've already disclosed. The trust fund gives you legal standing. You're not destitute, you can provide for Nova, and their case is weak. But it will be expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally brutal. They'll drag you through court, question every aspect of your life, and try to paint you as an unfit mother. I looked at Nova, playing happily with her toys on the living room floor. She had no idea that her grandparents were trying to take her away from the only parent she had left. How long would a custody fight take? Months. Maybe longer if they appeal. And during that time, they'll be watching everything you do, documenting everything you say, looking for any evidence to support their case. I made my decision. Let them try. I'm not giving up my daughter, and I'm not revealing the inheritance. Not yet. Ruth, are you sure? This is going to get ugly. It's already ugly, David. At least this way, I'll know exactly how ugly they're willing to get. The custody petition was just the beginning. Within a week, I started noticing things. A car parked across from my apartment building that hadn't been there before. The same man in the coffee shop where I took Nova for our morning walks. Questions from my neighbors about whether I was doing okay and if I needed any help. They were having me watched. Shannon's harassment escalated too. The photos of Nova's redecorated nursery were replaced by pictures of family gatherings I wasn't invited to. Birthday parties, holiday celebrations, family dinners. All featuring the Myers family looking happy and prosperous and complete. The message was clear. This is what Nova is missing. This is the family she could have if you weren't being so stubborn. But the most devastating attack came from an unexpected source. I was at the grocery store with Nova when I ran into Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman from my old neighborhood. She'd been kind to me when Andrew and I lived at the estate, always stopping to chat when I walked Nova in her stroller. Ruth, dear, how are you managing? We're doing well, Mrs. Patterson. Thank you for asking. I'm so glad to hear that. Though I have to say, I was surprised to hear about your difficulties. What difficulties? Mrs. Patterson looked uncomfortable. Well, the stories that have been going around. About your mental state, your ability to cope with Andrew's death. My stomach dropped. What stories? Oh dear, I probably shouldn't say anything. But people are talking about how you've been struggling, how you've been making poor decisions, how you might not be, well, stable enough to care for that precious baby. Who's saying these things? I really shouldn't, but it's been all over the neighborhood. Karen Myers has been so worried about you and Nova. She's been telling everyone how concerned the family is, how they're trying to help but you won't accept their support. I realized what was happening. The Myers family wasn't just building a legal case against me. They were building a social case. They were spreading rumors, planting stories, creating a narrative that would support their custody claim. Mrs. Patterson, has anyone asked you to talk to me about this? Well, Shannon did mention that if I saw you, I should encourage you to reach out to the family. She said they just want to help. And what exactly did Shannon tell you about my mental state? Mrs. Patterson looked increasingly uncomfortable. She said you've been paranoid, suspicious of people who are trying to help. She said you've been making wild accusations about the family, claiming they're trying to hurt you when they're just trying to support you through your grief. I thanked Mrs. Patterson and left the store with my head spinning. They weren't just attacking me in court. They were attacking my reputation, my credibility, my sanity. They were making me look like an unstable, paranoid woman who was imagining threats that didn't exist. The brilliant part was that the more I tried to defend myself, the more paranoid I would sound. If I told people that the Myers family was spreading lies about me, It would just confirm their narrative that I was suspicious and delusional. That night, I called David again. They're not just trying to take Nova. They're trying to destroy my credibility completely. I know. I've been hearing the rumors too. What do? You document everything. Every conversation, every encounter, every rumor you hear. And Ruth. Yes. You might want to consider ending this experiment sooner rather than later. They're not just revealing their character anymore. They're actively trying to destroy your life. I looked at Nova, sleeping peacefully in her crib. She trusted me to protect her, to keep her safe, to make the right decisions for both of us. Not yet, David. I need to see how far they'll go. What if they go too far? Then I'll show them exactly what too far looks like. I had no idea that within 2 weeks, they would cross a line that would change everything. But I was about to find out that greed makes people do things they never thought they were capable of. And when they did, I would be ready. The custody hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out, which gave the Myers family plenty of time to build their case against me. What I didn't expect was how systematic and ruthless their campaign would become. It started with the apartment inspections. Jeffrey arranged for a court-appointed social worker to visit my home as part of the custody evaluation. Mrs. Rodriguez was a tired-looking woman in her 50s who arrived with a clipboard and the kind of expression that suggested she'd seen every type of family dysfunction imaginable. Ms. Edwards, I'm here to assess Nova's living environment and your ability to provide adequate care. I welcomed her in, confident that my apartment was clean, safe, and well-organized. Nova's toys were neatly arranged, her crib was properly assembled, and I had documentation of her medical care, feeding schedule, and developmental milestones. Mrs. Rodriguez spent an hour going through everything. She measured the square footage, checked the locks on the windows, tested the smoke detectors, and examined Nova's food and clothing. She asked detailed questions about my daily routine, my support system, and my financial resources. The trust fund you established for Nova, can you explain the source of those funds? They came from my late husband's estate planning. But according to the family's attorney, your husband's estate had no significant liquid assets. The family's attorney may not have been aware of all of Andrew's financial arrangements. Mrs. Rodriguez made notes. Are you saying the family's legal representation was inadequate? I'm saying my husband was thorough in his planning, and not all of his assets were managed through the family's traditional channels. More notes. I could see how this would look in a report. The grieving widow making vague claims about hidden assets, contradicting the family's legal documentation. Ms. Edwards, have you been receiving any mental health counseling since your husband's death? I've been managing my grief privately. The family has expressed concerns about your emotional stability. They've mentioned incidents of paranoid behavior, accusations against family members, refusal to accept help. The family has their own perspective on our relationship. What's your perspective? I chose my words carefully. I believe the family is more concerned with protecting their interests than with Nova's well-being. Mrs. Rodriguez wrote that down too. Another mark in the paranoid and suspicious column. After she left, I realized how perfectly they'd set this up. Every reasonable response I gave could be interpreted as evasive. Every defense of my position could be seen as paranoid. They'd created a narrative where my competence and sanity were already in question, and anything I said to defend myself just reinforced their story. The pressure campaign intensified from there. Patrick started showing up at places where I took Nova. The pediatrician's office, the grocery store, the small park where we went for walks. He never approached us directly, but he was always visible, always watching, always taking notes or photos. When I mentioned this to Mrs. Rodriguez during her follow-up visit, she looked concerned. Ms. Edwards, are you saying you believe you're being followed? I'm saying Patrick Myers has been present at multiple locations where I've taken Nova, and it seems coordinated rather than coincidental. Have you considered that he might simply be concerned about his granddaughter's welfare? Have you considered that showing up uninvited at a child's medical appointments might be inappropriate regardless of the motivation? More notes. More evidence of my paranoid tendencies. Shannon's approach was more subtle but equally effective. She started a social media campaign that looked like genuine concern for family unity. She posted old photos of Andrew with Nova, always with captions about how much he'd loved his daughter and how important family was to him. She shared articles about the importance of extended family in child development, about the trauma children experience when separated from loving grandparents, about the challenges single mothers face without adequate support systems. The posts never mentioned me directly, but the implication was clear. Nova was being kept from her loving family by a stubborn, possibly unstable mother who was prioritizing her own grievances over her child's needs. The comments on these posts were even worse. Friends and acquaintances expressing sympathy for the family's situation, offering prayers for a resolution that would put Nova's needs first, suggesting that grief sometimes makes people make poor decisions. I couldn't respond without looking defensive. I couldn't ignore it without looking indifferent to public opinion. They'd created a narrative where I was the villain in my own story, and any attempt to correct it just made me look worse. But the real escalation came when they decided to target my finances directly. I was at the bank, making a routine deposit, when the teller looked confused. "Ms. Edwards, I'm showing some unusual activity on your account. Several large withdrawals over the past 2 weeks." "That's not possible. I haven't made any large withdrawals." She showed me the screen. For withdrawals of $2,500 each, all made at ATMs across the city, all using my debit card. "This is fraud. Someone's been using my card. Do you have your card with you?" I checked my wallet. The card was there, but as I looked at it more closely, I realized it wasn't quite right. The numbers were correct, but the magnetic strip looked newer than it should have. "I need to report this immediately and cancel this card." "Of course. But Ms. Edwards, I have to ask, is there anyone who might have had access to your card information?" "Family members, close friends." The question hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just stealing from me. They were creating evidence that I was financially irresponsible, that I was making large cash withdrawals for unknown purposes, that I might be involved in something questionable. When Mrs. Rodriguez asked about the withdrawals during her next visit, I tried to explain about the fraud. "So you're saying someone stole your debit card information and made unauthorized withdrawals?" "Yes. I filed a police report. But the withdrawals were made with your card and your PIN number. Someone must have gotten access to my information. Who would have had that access?" I couldn't say what I was thinking. I couldn't tell a court-appointed social worker that I suspected my dead husband's family of committing financial fraud to make me look unstable. That would sound exactly like the kind of paranoid accusation they'd been warning her about. "I don't know. Identity theft is common. Ms. Edwards, the bank's investigation showed that the withdrawals were made at times when you were documented to be in other locations. The timestamps don't match your alibi. Then someone else was using my card, or someone else had authorized access to your account." The implication was clear. Either I was lying about the withdrawals, or I was so careless with my financial information that I'd allowed someone to steal from me. Either way, it raised questions about my judgment and my ability to manage money responsibly. That's when I realized how sophisticated their plan really was. They weren't just trying to prove I was an unfit mother. They were systematically destroying every aspect of my credibility, my mental stability, my financial responsibility, my honesty, my judgment. They were building a case that would make it impossible for any court to trust me with Nova's welfare. And they were doing it in a way that made me look increasingly paranoid and delusional every time I tried to defend myself. The breaking point came when they made their final offer. Patrick called and asked to meet me at a coffee shop near my apartment. His tone was different this time, less hostile and more businesslike. "Ruth, I think we've all let this situation get out of hand." "What situation?" "This custody dispute. This family conflict. It's not good for anyone, especially Nova." "I agree. So I have a proposal that I think could resolve everything amicably." He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a legal document that made my blood run cold. "This is an agreement that would give the family shared custody of Nova while providing you with financial security and a fresh start." I read through the document carefully. It was a settlement offer that would give the Myers family primary custody of Nova, with me receiving supervised visitation rights. In exchange, they would pay me $250,000 and drop all legal challenges. "You want to buy my daughter. I want to provide for my granddaughter's future while ensuring you have the resources to rebuild your life. This gives you primary custody. It gives Nova stability, education, opportunities, and a family support system. It gives you control." Patrick leaned forward. "Ruth, let's be honest about your situation. You're living in a tiny apartment, you have no steady income, you're facing a custody battle you can't afford to fight, and you're exhibiting behavior that's raising serious questions about your mental state. What behavior? The paranoid accusations against the family, the claims about financial fraud, the refusal to accept help or support, the isolation from friends and community. Those aren't paranoid accusations. They're observations about your family's behavior. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You're so convinced that we're your enemies that you can't see we're trying to help you. I stared at the document. $250,000 was more money than most people saw in a lifetime. To someone who appeared to be struggling financially, it would look like a generous offer. To someone facing expensive legal bills and an uncertain future, it would look like salvation. But I knew what it really was. It was the final piece of their plan. If I signed this document, I would be admitting that I couldn't provide for Nova, that I was willing to give up my parental rights for money, that everything they'd said about me was true. What if I don't sign this? Patrick's expression hardened. Then we proceed with the custody hearing. And Ruth, I have to warn you, the evidence we've gathered is quite compelling. The financial irregularities, the mental health concerns, the unstable living situation. It's not going to look good for you. What evidence? The unauthorized withdrawals from your account. The paranoid behavior documented by multiple witnesses. The refusal to cooperate with family members who are trying to help. The isolation of Nova from her extended family. You created that evidence. Did we? Or did we simply document behavior that was already concerning? I realized this was their endgame. They'd spent weeks creating a narrative, manufacturing evidence, and building a case that would make me look like an unfit mother. Now they were offering me a way out that would confirm everything they'd said about me. If I signed the document, I was admitting I was a bad mother who was willing to sell her child. If I didn't sign it, I was a stubborn, paranoid woman who was putting her own pride ahead of her daughter's welfare. I need time to think about this. Of course. But Ruth, don't take too long. The custody hearing is in 2 weeks, and after that, this offer won't be available. I left the coffee shop with the document in my hands and a decision to make. That night, I called David Chun. David, they're trying to buy Nova. I know. I've been expecting this. They've created evidence to make me look unfit. Financial fraud, mental health concerns, everything. I know about that too. How do you know? Because Andrew predicted this exact scenario. He knew his family well enough to know they'd try to destroy you if they couldn't control you. What do I do? That depends. Are you ready to end this experiment? I looked at Nova, sleeping peacefully in her crib. She trusted me to protect her, to make the right decisions, to keep her safe from people who would use her as a weapon in their greed. Not yet, but soon. Ruth, they're not going to stop. They're going to keep escalating until they get what they want. I know, but I need them to show me one more thing. What's that? I need them to show me they're willing to commit actual crimes to get what they want. What if they are? Then I'll show them what happens when you threaten the wrong person's child. I had no idea that within days, they would cross that final line. But when they did, I would be ready to destroy them completely. The call came at 3 a.m. I jerked awake to my phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. Nova stirred in her crib, but didn't wake up. The caller ID showed David Chen's number, which sent ice through my veins. David never called in the middle of the night unless something was catastrophically wrong. David, what's happened? Ruth, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Don't react, don't get emotional, just listen. You're scaring me. The Myers family has filed an emergency custody petition. They're claiming you've abandoned Nova. What? That's insane. She's right here in her crib. I know that. But they've presented evidence to a judge that suggests you left Nova unattended for several hours yesterday evening. I sat up, my mind racing. I never left her alone. We were home all evening. Ruth, they have photographs. Time-stamped photos showing your apartment with no lights on, no movement, no signs of occupancy between 6 p.m. and midnight yesterday. That's impossible. They also have a witness statement from your neighbor, Mrs. Chun, saying she heard Nova crying for extended periods without any response from you. My blood turned to ice. Mrs. Chun was the elderly woman who lived next door. She'd always been friendly, always asked about Nova when we passed in the hallway. David, I was home all evening. Nova and I had dinner. I gave her a bath. We read stories. She went to sleep at 8. I never left the apartment. I believe you. But Ruth, there's more. What more? They're claiming this is part of a pattern of neglect. They have documentation of you leaving Nova in the car while you went into stores, of you being intoxicated while caring for her, of you having strange men over to the apartment at inappropriate hours. None of that is true. None of it. I know. But Ruth, they have photos, witness statements, even a police report. What police report? Someone called in a welfare check on Nova 3 days ago. Anonymous tip claiming they heard a baby crying for hours and were concerned about neglect. I remembered that day. Nova had been fussy with teething, crying on and off for most of the afternoon. But I'd been with her the entire time, comforting her, trying everything I could think of to help her feel better. The police came by. Officer Martinez. He saw that Nova was fine, that I was caring for her appropriately. He said everything looked normal. According to the report, he noted that you seemed agitated and defensive, and that Nova appeared distressed and inconsolable. She was teething. Of course she was fussy. Ruth, calm down. I'm on your side here. But you need to understand what we're dealing with. They've built a comprehensive case that makes you look like a neglectful mother who's spiraling out of control. How is that possible? I document everything. I have photos, videos, medical records showing Nova is healthy and well cared for. And they have photos, witness statements, and official reports suggesting the opposite. I got out of bed and walked to the window, looking down at the street below. A car was parked across from my building, the same car I'd been seeing for weeks. David, they've been watching me, following me. They've been setting this up. Probably. But proving that in court is going to be nearly impossible. What happens now? There's an emergency hearing tomorrow morning. The judge will decide whether to grant temporary custody to the Myers family pending a full investigation. Can they do that? Can they just take her? If the judge believes Nova is in immediate danger, yes. I looked at my daughter, sleeping peacefully in her crib. The idea of strangers coming to take her away, of her waking up in a house with people who saw her as a prize to be won rather than a child to be loved, made me physically sick. David, I need to tell you something. What? I think they've been in my apartment. What do you mean? Little things have been moved. My spare key went missing last week. The photos they have of my apartment with no lights on, that's because someone turned off my circuit breaker. Ruth, do you have any proof of this? No. But David, they're not just building a false case against me. They're actively sabotaging my life to create evidence. Even if that's true, we can't prove it in court tomorrow. Then what do? You could reveal the inheritance. Right now. Show the judge that you have $200 million, that you can provide for Nova better than anyone, that this whole custody case is based on false premises. And then what? They get access to Andrew's fortune anyway? They win by losing. Ruth, if you don't reveal the inheritance, you might lose Nova. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the impossible choice. Reveal the money and give the Myers family exactly what they'd been trying to steal, or keep the secret and risk losing my daughter to their lies. There has to be another way. What way? I don't know yet. But David, I need you to do something for me. What? I need you to investigate the Myers family's finances. Specifically, I need you to look at Andrew's foundation. The charitable foundation? Why? Because if they're willing to commit fraud to steal from me, they might be willing to commit fraud to steal from a charity too. Ruth, that's a serious accusation. It's a serious family. Look into it, David. Please. I'll see what I can find. But Ruth, the hearing is in 6 hours. You need to be prepared for the possibility that Nova might not be coming home with you tomorrow. After I hung up, I sat in the dark living room and tried to process what was happening. The Myers family hadn't just built a case against me. They'd manufactured evidence, bribed witnesses, and possibly broken into my home to create the appearance of neglect. They were willing to traumatize a baby, to tear a child away from her mother, to destroy a family, all to get their hands on money they thought they deserved. I looked at the custody settlement offer Patrick had given me, still sitting on my kitchen table. $250,000 to give up my daughter. It wasn't an offer anymore. It was a threat. Take the money and disappear, or lose Nova anyway and get nothing. But there was something they didn't know, something they couldn't have anticipated. I wasn't the broken, desperate widow they thought I was. I was a woman with $200 million and the patience to let them destroy themselves completely. The hearing was a nightmare. Judge Morrison was a stern woman in her 60s who looked like she'd heard every sob story and seen every family dysfunction imaginable. The Myers family arrived with Jeffrey and 2 additional attorneys, all carrying thick folders of evidence. I arrived with David and a prayer. Jeffrey presented their case with clinical precision. Photos of my apartment appearing empty and dark. Witness statements from neighbors about crying and neglect. The police report describing me as agitated and defensive. Bank records showing the suspicious withdrawals that made me look financially unstable. Your Honor, the evidence clearly shows a pattern of neglect and instability that puts this child at immediate risk. When it was my turn to respond, I felt like I was drowning. Your Honor, I have never neglected my daughter. These allegations are false and appear to be part of a coordinated campaign to discredit me. Ms. Edwards, are you suggesting that multiple witnesses, police officers, and photographic evidence are all part of a conspiracy against you? I'm suggesting that the evidence has been manipulated to create a false narrative. Judge Morrison looked skeptical. Do you have any proof of this manipulation? Not yet, Your Honor. But I'm requesting time to investigate these allegations and present a proper defense. Ms. Edwards, this is an emergency hearing to determine immediate custody. The question is whether Nova is safe in your care right now today. I looked at the Myers family, sitting smugly in their expensive suits, confident that their money and connections and manufactured evidence would give them everything they wanted. Your Honor, I love my daughter more than anything in this world. I have never and would never do anything to harm her or neglect her care. I'm sure you believe that, Ms. Edwards. But belief and reality don't always align. Judge Morrison reviewed the evidence for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Based on the evidence presented, I'm granting temporary custody of Nova Edwards to her paternal grandparents, Karen and Patrick Myers, pending a full investigation and hearing. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt David's hand on my arm, steadying me as the room spun. Your Honor, please. Ms. Edwards, you will have supervised visitation rights twice a week for 2 hours each visit. The full custody hearing is scheduled for 3 weeks from today. I watched in horror as a social worker approached to take Nova from me. My daughter, who had never spent a night away from me, who still woke up looking for me in the morning, who trusted me to protect her from everything. Mama will see you soon, baby, I whispered as I kissed her forehead. Mama loves you so much. Nova started crying as the social worker carried her away. The sound of her cries echoing in the courtroom was the most devastating thing I'd ever heard. Karen Myers walked past me on her way out, and for just a moment, her mask slipped completely. You should have taken the money, Ruth. Now you get nothing. That night, I sat in Nova's empty nursery and called David. Did you find anything about the foundation? Ruth, you need to grieve right now. You need to process what happened today. Did you find anything? David sighed. Yes, I found something. The foundation's accounts show regular withdrawals over the past 6 months. Large withdrawals that don't correspond to any documented charitable activities. How large? About $5 million. They're stealing from Andrew's charity. It looks that way. But Ruth, even if we can prove that, it doesn't change the custody situation. Yes, it does. Because now I know exactly how far they're willing to go. What do you mean? I mean they've just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Ruth, what are you planning? I'm planning to show them what happens when you steal from the wrong person's child. How? The foundation gala is next week. The annual fundraiser where they celebrate Andrew's charitable legacy in front of the city's elite. What about it? That's where this ends, David. That's where I show them exactly who they've been dealing with. Ruth, you can't do anything that would jeopardize getting Nova back. I'm not going to jeopardize anything. I'm going to guarantee it. How? By showing everyone in that room exactly who the Myers family really is. I hung up and looked at the empty crib, at the toys scattered on the floor, at the photos of Nova that covered every surface. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd broken me. They had no idea what was coming. The first supervised visit was torture. I sat in a sterile room at the Family Services building while a social worker watched me interact with my own daughter. Nova clung to me the entire 2 hours, crying every time I tried to put her down, refusing to eat or play, or do anything except hold on to me like I might disappear again. She's having adjustment difficulties, the supervisor noted in her report. The child appears anxious and clingy, which could indicate trauma from the custody change. She's anxious because she's been taken from her mother, I said. Or she's anxious because her previous living situation was unstable. Everything I said was twisted. Every normal reaction Nova had to being separated from me was used as evidence that I'd somehow damaged her. When she cried, it meant I'd traumatized her. When she was happy to see me, It meant she was confused about attachment. When she didn't want me to leave, it meant she was exhibiting unhealthy dependency. The Myers family was already working to erase me from Nova's life. Karen sent me photos from Nova's new nursery. Not the redecorated room at the estate, but a completely new space designed to look like something from a magazine. Expensive furniture, designer clothes, toys that cost more than most people's rent. The message was clear. This is what we can give her. This is what you never could. But the photos that broke my heart were the ones of Nova with other people. Karen feeding her breakfast. Patrick reading her stories. Shannon pushing her on a swing at some exclusive playground I'd never seen. They were creating new memories, new routines, new attachments. They were making Nova's life with me seem like a distant, unpleasant memory that she'd eventually forget. The worst part was that I could see Nova changing. During our second visit, she seemed less desperate to hold on to me. She played with the toys in the visitation room instead of clinging to my side. When I tried to sing her the lullaby I'd sung every night since she was born, she looked at me blankly, like she didn't remember. She's adapting well to her new environment, the supervisor noted. Children are resilient. She's forgetting me. She's learning to feel secure with her caregivers. I wanted to scream that I was her caregiver. I was her mother. But in this room, with this woman watching and taking notes, I was just a visitor, a potential threat to Nova's stability. The legal bills were destroying what little savings I had left. David was working for reduced fees, but even reduced fees for a custody battle added up quickly. I was burning through the $30,000 I'd been living on, and I couldn't access the trust fund without raising questions about where the money had come from. I had $200 million, and I was going broke. The isolation was almost worse than the financial pressure. Word had spread through my old social circles about the custody case. People who had been friendly when I was Andrew's wife now crossed the street to avoid me. The few who did speak to me offered the kind of pitying sympathy reserved for people who'd brought their troubles on themselves. I heard about your situation with Nova, my former neighbor Mrs. Williams said when I ran into her at the grocery store. It's so sad when grief makes people make poor choices. What poor choices? Oh, honey, I don't judge. We all cope differently. But maybe this is for the best. Maybe Nova needs stability right now. She had stability. With me. Mrs. Williams gave me the kind of smile people use when they think you're delusional. Of course, dear. I'm sure you did your best. Even my own family was starting to doubt me. My sister called from Detroit, her voice careful and concerned. Ruth, Mom's been reading about the custody case online. She's worried about you. I'm fine, Lisa. This is all lies and manipulation. But Ruth, if there's even a chance that you're not in the right headspace to care for Nova, you think I'm an unfit mother? I think you've been through trauma, and sometimes trauma makes us think we're handling things better than we are. So you believe them. You believe I neglected my daughter. I believe you love Nova. But love isn't always enough. I hung up and realized that the Myers family had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. They hadn't just taken Nova. They'd convinced everyone who knew me that they were right to take her. The third visit was when I knew I was losing her. Nova barely looked at me when I walked into the room. She was playing with the expensive electronic toy that sang songs and flashed lights, completely absorbed in something that hadn't existed in her life a week ago. Hi, baby, I said, sitting down next to her. She glanced up, smiled politely, and went back to her toy. Nova, it's Mama. Do you want to read a story? She shook her head without looking up. I tried everything. Songs she used to love, games we used to play, even just holding her. But she was distant, distracted, like I was a stranger trying too hard to get her attention. She's forming new attachments, the supervisor explained. It's healthy for children to bond with their primary caregivers. I'm her primary caregiver. Not anymore. That night, I called David in tears. They're erasing me, David. Nova's forgetting who I am. Ruth, she's a baby. She's not forgetting you. She is. I can see it happening. In a few more weeks, I'll be nobody to her. That's not going to happen. How do you know? Because we're going to get her back. With what? They have witnesses, evidence, money, connections. They have Nova. What do I have? You have the truth. The truth doesn't matter if no one believes it. Ruth, I found something else about the foundation. What? The withdrawals aren't just theft. They're forgery. Someone's been signing Andrew's name to authorization documents. Andrew's been dead for 4 months. Exactly. which means someone in the Myers family has been forging his signature to steal from his charity. Can you prove it? I'm working on it. But Ruth, this is a federal crime. If we can prove they've been forging documents and stealing from a charitable foundation, it changes everything. How? Because it shows they're willing to commit serious crimes to get what they want. It undermines their credibility completely. Will it be enough to get Nova back? It might be. But Ruth, I need more time to build the case. How much time? A few more weeks. I don't have a few more weeks. Nova's forgetting me now. Ruth, you have to trust the process. The process is destroying my family. After I hung up, I sat in Nova's empty room and faced the truth I'd been avoiding. I was losing. The Myers family had outplayed me at every turn. They'd anticipated my moves, countered my strategies, and turned my own love for Nova against me. They'd made me look like exactly what they'd always said I was, a gold-digging opportunist who was unfit to be part of their family. The inheritance that was supposed to be my secret weapon had become my prison. I couldn't use it without validating everything they'd said about me. I couldn't reveal it without giving them access to Andrew's fortune. I couldn't fight them without looking like the paranoid, unstable woman they'd painted me as. I was trapped by my own plan. But as I sat there in the dark, surrounded by Nova's toys and clothes and the remnants of the life we'd built together, I realized something important. I wasn't the same person who'd been thrown out of the Myers estate 4 months ago. I wasn't the grieving widow who'd believed in the goodness of people and the power of truth and justice. I was someone who'd learned that sometimes the only way to fight monsters is to become something they can't defeat. I was someone who'd discovered that patience isn't just a virtue. It's a weapon. And I was someone who was about to show the Myers family exactly what happens when you steal from the wrong person's child. The foundation gala was in 3 days. I called David one more time. David, I need you to prepare everything. All the evidence about the foundation theft, all the documentation about the forged signatures, everything. Ruth, what are you planning? I'm planning to end this. How? By giving them exactly what they deserve. Ruth, you can't do anything that would jeopardize the custody case. I'm not going to jeopardize the custody case. I'm going to win it. How? By showing everyone in that room exactly who they've been dealing with. Ruth, please be careful. Don't do anything you can't take back. David, they took my daughter. They stole from my husband's charity. They destroyed my reputation and turned my family against me. There's nothing left to take back. There's Nova. Exactly. There's Nova. And I'm going to get her back. How? By reminding everyone that sometimes the person you underestimate is the most dangerous person in the room. I hung up and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't the naive, trusting person who'd married Andrew Myers. She wasn't the broken widow who'd been thrown out of her home. She was someone who'd learned that justice isn't something that happens to you. It's something you make happen. And in 3 days, I was going to make it happen. The morning of the foundation gala, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. I had a choice to make. Not the choice the Myers family thought they'd given me between money and my daughter. Not the choice between revealing the inheritance or losing Nova forever. A different choice entirely. I could stay the victim of their narrative, or I could become the author of my own story. I spent the morning getting ready with the kind of precision I used to reserve for the most important architectural presentations of my career. Every detail mattered. Every element had to be perfect. The dress I chose was one Andrew had bought me for our first anniversary. Black, elegant, expensive enough to belong at a high society gala, but not so flashy as to draw attention away from what I was about to say. I wanted to look like someone who belonged in that room, someone who had every right to be there. I did my makeup carefully, covering the dark circles that had become permanent fixtures under my eyes since Nova was taken. I styled my hair the way Andrew had always loved it. I put on the pearl earrings he'd given me when Nova was born. I wanted to look like his wife. I wanted to remind everyone in that room that I had been part of this family, that I had loved Andrew Myers more than anyone in that room ever had. David called while I was getting dressed. Ruth, I have everything ready. The financial records, the forged documents, the evidence of the foundation theft. But I have to ask you one more time. Are you sure about this? I'm sure. Once you do this, there's no going back. You'll be exposing yourself to the same scrutiny you're putting them under. Good. Let them scrutinize me. Let them examine every aspect of my life. I have nothing to hide. Ruth, they could retaliate. They could make things worse for you. How could they make things worse? They've already taken my daughter, destroyed my reputation, and stolen from my husband's charity. What's left? Your safety, your future, your ability to rebuild your life. David, if I don't get Nova back, I don't have a future worth rebuilding. And if this doesn't work, then at least I'll know I fought for her with everything I had. David was quiet for a moment. Ruth, there's something else you should know. What? I got a call from Jeffrey this morning. They want to meet with you before the gala. What kind of meeting? They're offering a new settlement. $2 million in guaranteed visitation rights if you agree to give up your custody claim. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. They're scared. What makes you say that? Because they're offering me more money. A lot more money. They wouldn't do that unless they thought I had something that could hurt them. Do you? I have the truth, David. And tonight, everyone's going to hear it. The Myers family had chosen the ballroom at the Fairmont Hotel for the gala. It was the same hotel where Andrew and I had our wedding reception, which I was sure wasn't a coincidence. They wanted to remind everyone that this had been their space first, their world, their domain. I arrived early, before the guests, but after the staff had finished setting up. The ballroom was transformed into an elegant showcase of wealth and philanthropy. Round tables covered in white linens, centerpieces of white roses and baby's breath, a stage with a podium where the family would speak about Andrew's legacy. The irony was overwhelming. They were celebrating a charity they'd been stealing from, honoring a man whose wishes they completely ignored, raising money for causes they didn't care about. I found my seat at a table near the back. Not the family table where I would have sat as Andrew's wife, but close enough to see everything, far enough away to avoid immediate confrontation. The guests began arriving around 7. The city's elite, dressed in their finest clothes, ready to write checks and feel good about their charitable contributions. Politicians, business leaders, society matrons, all the people whose opinions mattered in this world. I recognized many of them. People who had been friendly to me when I was Andrew's wife, who had complimented my dress at charity events, who had asked about Nova's development and my architectural projects. Tonight, they looked at me with curiosity and pity. The fallen widow, the woman who'd lost custody of her own child, the cautionary tale about what happened when you married above your station. Karen Myers took the stage first, resplendent in a silver gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. She spoke about Andrew's vision, his commitment to helping others, his belief in the power of community support. Andrew understood that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives we touch and the difference we make, she said to enthusiastic applause. I almost choked on the hypocrisy. Patrick spoke next, discussing the foundation's accomplishments over the past year. The housing projects funded, the scholarships awarded, the families helped. He presented numbers that looked impressive until you realized they represented only a fraction of what the foundation should have been able to accomplish with its resources. We've been able to help over 200 families this year, he announced proudly. With the money they hadn't stolen, they could have helped 2,000 families. Shannon's speech was about continuing Andrew's legacy, about ensuring that his vision lived on through future generations. She spoke about family, about the importance of stability and tradition, about protecting the things that mattered most. Andrew believed that children deserved security, love, and the guidance of family who truly understood their needs, she said, looking directly at me. The message was clear. Nova was better off with them. I was the threat to her security, not them. Jeffrey's presentation was about the foundation's financial health and future plans. He showed charts and graphs demonstrating steady growth, responsible management, and ambitious goals for the coming year. Every number was a lie. As I sat there listening to them speak about Andrew's legacy, while systematically destroying everything he'd built, I felt something shift inside me. The last remnants of doubt, the final traces of the woman who'd believed in fairness and justice and the power of truth, disappeared completely. These people had taken my husband's money, stolen from his charity, kidnapped my daughter, and now they were standing in front of the city's most influential people lying about all of it. They thought they'd won. They thought I was broken. They thought I would sit quietly in the back of the room and accept my defeat with grace. They were about to learn how wrong they were. When Karen returned to the podium for closing remarks, I stood up. The movement caught her attention, and for just a moment, her composure slipped. She'd been expecting me to stay hidden, to accept my place as the disgraced former family member who'd been allowed to attend out of pity. Before we conclude tonight's celebration, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom, I think there's something everyone should know about the Myers family and their management of Andrew's foundation. The room erupted in whispers. Heads turned toward me, faces showing confusion, curiosity, and in some cases recognition. Karen tried to regain control. Ruth, dear, this isn't the appropriate time or place. Actually, Karen, this is exactly the right time and place. Because everyone in this room has donated money to Andrew's foundation, believing it was being used to help people. They deserve to know the truth about where their money has really been going. Security guards started moving toward me, but I continued speaking. They deserve to know that over the past 6 months, $5 million has been stolen from the foundation through forged documents and fraudulent withdrawals. The whispers became gasps. People were pulling out their phones, recording, taking pictures. They deserve to know that the family standing on that stage has been systematically looting the charity established in my husband's memory. Ruth, stop this immediately, Patrick commanded from the stage. They deserve to know that these people threw me and my infant daughter out of our home 3 days after Andrew's funeral, claiming he'd left us nothing, while sitting on a $200 million inheritance that belonged to us. The room exploded. Voices raised in shock, confusion, outrage. The carefully orchestrated evening of philanthropy and family legacy had become something else entirely. And they deserve to know, I continued, my voice rising above the chaos, that when I refused to be intimidated into giving up my daughter's inheritance, they manufactured evidence to make me look like an unfit mother and stole my child through fraudulent custody proceedings. Karen was shouting something from the stage, but I couldn't hear her over the noise of the crowd. My name is Ruth Edwards, I said, pulling out the legal documents David had prepared. I am the sole heir to Andrew Myers' personal fortune, and I am the rightful administrator of his foundation. And I have proof of everything I've just told you. Security reached me then, but it was too late. The damage was done. The truth was out. The carefully constructed narrative the Myers family had built was crumbling in real time in front of the most influential people in the city. As they escorted me from the ballroom, I looked back at the stage where the Myers family stood in shock and growing panic. You have 30 seconds to tell me why I shouldn't cut every single one of you out of this fortune forever, I called out, echoing the words I'd imagined saying for months. But I already knew the answer. There was no reason, no excuse, no justification for what they'd done. And now, finally, everyone else knew it too. The aftermath of the gala was swift and devastating. By the time I got home that night, my phone was ringing constantly. Reporters, lawyers, social workers, people who'd been at the gala wanting to know more. I turned it off and sat in Nova's empty room waiting. I didn't have to wait long. David called at 6 in the morning on his office line. Ruth, what have you done? What needed to be done? The story is everywhere. Local news, social media, the business journals. Widow exposes family charity fraud at gala. $200 million inheritance scandal. Custody battle reveals foundation theft. Good. Ruth, Jeffrey called me an hour ago. The family wants to meet. I bet they do. They're offering full custody of Nova, complete control of the inheritance, and a public apology. In exchange for what? Your silence about the foundation theft. I laughed. Tell them no. Ruth, this is everything you wanted. No, David. This is everything they're willing to give me to avoid criminal prosecution. There's a difference. What more do you want? I want justice. The meeting was set for 10 a.m. at David's office. The entire Myers family arrived with a team of lawyers that looked like they'd been pulled out of bed and told to fix an unfixable situation. Karen looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. Her perfect composure was gone, replaced by barely controlled panic. Patrick kept checking his phone, probably monitoring the news coverage that was destroying their reputation in real time. Shannon looked furious, like this was all somehow my fault for not accepting their generous offer to steal my daughter and my inheritance. Jeffrey looked like a lawyer who'd just realized his clients had been lying to him about everything. Ruth, Karen began, I think we can all agree that last night got out of hand. Did it? I thought it went exactly as planned. We're prepared to make this right. Full custody of Nova, complete control of Andrew's assets, and a generous settlement for any misunderstandings. What misunderstandings would those be, Karen? The custody situation was based on legitimate concerns about Nova's welfare. Concerns you manufactured through fraud and perjury. Jeffrey leaned forward. Ruth, we're offering you everything you want. Your daughter, your inheritance, your life back. All we're asking is that you don't pursue criminal charges related to the foundation. Why would I agree to that? Because criminal charges would be messy for everyone, including you. How so? Because you'd have to explain why you hid your inheritance for months while living in poverty. You'd have to justify letting your daughter be taken rather than revealing your assets. A prosecutor might wonder if you were using Nova as a pawn in some elaborate revenge scheme. I looked at each of their faces. Even now, even after being exposed publicly, they were trying to manipulate me. They were trying to make me feel guilty for their crimes. You're right, Jeffrey. A prosecutor might wonder about that. So let me explain it to them. I pulled out a folder David had prepared. This is a complete timeline of everything that happened, starting with Andrew's death. Every lie you told, every document you forged, every law you broke. I spread the papers across the conference table. Here's the original will leaving me everything. Here are the bank records showing the foundation theft. Here are the forged signatures on withdrawal authorizations. Here are the witness statements you paid for. Here are the photos you staged to make me look neglectful. Karen's face went white. You can't prove any of that. Actually, I can. Because you got sloppy, Karen. You got so confident that you destroyed me that you stopped being careful. I pulled out another document. This is a recording of Patrick offering to buy my daughter for $250,000. This is a recording of you threatening to take Nova if I didn't accept your settlement. This is a recording of Shannon admitting she redecorated Nova's nursery specifically to hurt me. Those recordings are illegal, Jeffrey protested. No, they're not. I was a party to every conversation. I had every right to record them. Ruth, Patrick said, his voice strained. What do you want? I want you to understand something. For months, you've been treating me like I was powerless. Like I was some desperate widow who would accept whatever scraps you threw at me. I stood up and walked to the window overlooking the city. You thought I was weak because I was grieving. You thought I was stupid because I trusted you. You thought I was helpless because I didn't fight back immediately. I turned to face them. But what you didn't understand is that I wasn't weak. I was patient. I wasn't stupid. I was strategic. And I wasn't helpless. I was gathering evidence. Evidence of what? Shannon asked. Evidence that you're exactly the kind of people Andrew spent his life trying to get away from. Greedy, cruel, entitled people who think money gives you the right to destroy other people's lives. I sat back down and looked directly at Karen. Andrew knew you'd try this. He knew you'd try to steal from me and Nova. That's why he set up the inheritance the way he did. That's why he made sure I'd have a choice about how to handle it. What choice? Karen whispered. The choice between taking the money and running, or staying and fighting for what was right. I pulled out the final document. This is Andrew's letter to me, written 2 weeks before he died. He explains everything. His concerns about his family, his plans for protecting Nova and me, and his hope that if you showed me who you really were, I'd have the strength to show you who I really am. I read from the letter. Ruth, if you're reading this, it means my family has done exactly what I feared they would do. They've tried to steal from you and Nova, and they've probably tried to make you feel like you deserve it. You don't. You deserve everything I'm leaving you, and more importantly, Nova deserves a mother who will fight for her. The room was silent. He also wrote this. I know my family thinks money is power, but real power is knowing who you are and what you're worth, regardless of what anyone else thinks. You have that power, Ruth. Use it. I closed the letter and looked at each of them. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to return every penny you stole from the foundation. You're going to publicly apologize for the custody fraud. You're going to transfer Nova back to me immediately. And you're going to stay out of our lives forever. And if we don't, Patrick asked, then I'll pursue criminal charges for fraud, forgery, perjury, child endangerment, and theft from a charitable organization. I'll make sure every newspaper, every social media platform, and every business journal in the country knows exactly what kind of people you are. You'll destroy us, Karen said. You destroyed yourselves. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it. Jeffrey tried one last time. Ruth, think about Nova. Do you really want her to grow up knowing her grandparents are in prison? I want her to grow up knowing that her mother fought for her. I want her to know that when people try to hurt the people you love, you don't back down. You fight back. I stood up again. You have 24 hours to agree to my terms. After that, the offer expires and I go straight to the district attorney." "Ruth," Karen said desperately, "we're family." "No, Karen. You made it very clear that we're not family. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't lie to each other. Family doesn't try to take children away from their mothers." I walked toward the door, then turned back. "But you know what? I should thank you. Because you taught me something important. You taught me that sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones who show you exactly how strong you really are." I left them sitting in that conference room, probably for the first time in their lives, completely powerless. That afternoon, I got the call I'd been waiting for. "Ms. Edwards, this is Judge Morrison. I'm calling to inform you that the custody order has been reversed. Nova will be returned to your care immediately." "Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Edwards, I owe you an apology. It appears the evidence presented in the original hearing was problematic." "Yes, Your Honor. It was. Nova will be ready for pickup at 5 p.m. today." I hung up and called David. "It's over, David. I'm getting Nova back." "Ruth, I'm proud of you. You did something incredible. I did what any mother would do." "No, Ruth. You did what a very strong, very smart mother would do. Most people would have given up. I had something most people don't have." "What's that?" $200 million and the patience to use it right. At 5 p.m., I walked into the family services building to pick up my daughter. Nova saw me and started crying, reaching for me with both arms. I picked her up and held her close, breathing in the smell of her hair, feeling her heartbeat against my chest. "Mama's here, baby. Mama's never leaving you again." As we walked out of that building together, I realized something important. I wasn't the same person who'd been thrown out of the Myers estate 6 months ago. I wasn't the naive woman who'd believed in fairness and justice and the goodness of people. I was someone who'd learned that sometimes you have to create your own justice. I was someone who'd discovered that patience isn't weakness. It's strategy. And I was someone who'd proven that underestimating the wrong person can be the biggest mistake of your life. 6 months later, I stood in the boardroom of the newly renovated Andrew Myers Foundation headquarters, looking out at a room full of people who actually cared about the work we were doing. The foundation had been completely restructured. New board members, new oversight procedures, new transparency requirements. Every dollar was accounted for, every project was documented, every family we helped had a story that mattered. We'd recovered the $5 million the Myers family had stolen, plus interest and penalties. We'd expanded our housing program to serve 3 times as many families. We'd established scholarship funds, job training programs, and childcare services for single mothers. Andrew's vision was finally being realized the way he'd always intended. "The quarterly report shows we've helped over 800 families this year," David announced to the board. "That's 4 times more than the previous year. And we're still operating under budget," added Dr. Sarah Chun, our new program director. "When you're not stealing from the charity, it's amazing how much good you can do with the money." The room laughed. It had become a running joke among the staff, but it wasn't really funny. It was a reminder of how much damage greed could do, and how much good was possible when people actually cared about the mission. Nova was playing quietly in the corner of the boardroom, building towers with blocks and knocking them down with delighted giggles. She was 2 years old now, healthy and happy and completely unaware that she was worth $200 million. She called me Mama and knew that I would always be there for her. That was all that mattered. The Myers family had disappeared from our lives completely. Karen and Patrick had moved to Florida, selling their estate to pay legal fees and restitution. Shannon had relocated to California, where she was working as a real estate agent and apparently struggling to maintain the lifestyle she'd grown up expecting. Jeffrey had been disbarred for his role in the custody fraud. He was facing criminal charges for forgery and perjury, though his lawyers were negotiating a plea deal that would probably keep him out of prison. None of them had attempted to contact Nova or me since the day they'd signed the agreement returning her to my custody. They'd given up all parental rights, all claims to Andrew's estate, and all involvement in the foundation. In exchange, I'd agreed not to pursue criminal charges for the theft. It wasn't justice in the traditional sense, but it was the kind of justice that protected Nova from having to grow up with the trauma of seeing her grandparents in prison. Sometimes mercy is more powerful than revenge. My personal life had changed dramatically too. I'd moved back into the estate, but I'd completely renovated it. Gone were the cold, formal rooms designed to impress visitors. In their place were warm, comfortable spaces designed for living. Nova's new nursery was painted in soft blues and greens, with a reading corner where we spent hours every day with books. I'd also started dating again, though very carefully and very slowly. Marcus Williams was nothing like the men the Myers family would have approved of. He was a teacher at the local elementary school, the son of immigrants, someone who'd worked for everything he had and understood the value of both money and the things money couldn't buy. He'd met Nova and me at the park one afternoon when she'd fallen and scraped her knee. He'd helped clean her up, made her laugh, and asked if we'd like to get ice cream sometime. "I should probably tell you," I'd said on our third date. "I'm worth about $200 million. Marcus had nearly choked on his coffee. "I'm sorry, what? It's a long story, but I wanted you to know before this gets serious. Ruth, I teach second grade. I drive a 10-year-old Honda. I live in a one-bedroom apartment. Are you sure you want to date someone like me?" "Marcus, I've dated someone with money. It didn't work out well." He'd laughed. "Fair enough. But just so you know, I'm not interested in your money. I'm interested in you." "How do I know that?" "Because I asked you out before I knew about the money. And because if I was interested in money, I probably wouldn't have become a teacher." 6 months later, Marcus had moved into the estate with Nova and me. He'd insisted on signing a prenuptial agreement that protected my assets and Nova's inheritance. He'd also insisted on continuing to work as a teacher, even though I could have supported him comfortably. "I need to be useful," he'd explained. "I need to contribute something meaningful to the world." That's when I knew I'd found the right person. Nova adored him. She called him Marmar and insisted he read her bedtime stories every night. He was patient with her tantrums, creative with her games, and protective of her in a way that reminded me of Andrew. But Marcus was his own person, with his own dreams and goals and values. He wasn't trying to replace Andrew or compete with his memory. He was just trying to build something new and good with Nova and me. The custody battle had left scars, but they were healing. Nova had no memory of the months she'd spent with the Myers family. To her, that time was just a confusing period when Mama had been sad and visits had been strange. Now that we were together again, she was thriving. She was talking in full sentences, running everywhere instead of walking, and showing signs of the same stubborn independence that had gotten me through the worst period of my life. "Mama, I do it myself," was her favorite phrase, whether she was trying to put on her shoes or climb onto a chair that was too tall for her. "She gets that from you," Marcus would say, watching her struggle with something she was determined to master on her own. "Good," I'd reply. "She's going to need that." The legal aftermath had been more complicated than I'd expected. The district attorney had opened an investigation into the foundation theft, even though I'd agreed not to press charges. Apparently, stealing from a charity was the kind of crime that prosecutors took personally, regardless of what the victims wanted. Jeffrey was cooperating with the investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence. Karen and Patrick were fighting the charges, but their lawyers had advised them that their best option was probably a plea deal that would involve restitution and community service. "They're going to get away with it, aren't they?" I'd asked David during one of our regular legal updates. "They're going to face consequences," he'd replied. "Maybe not the consequences you'd prefer, but consequences nonetheless." "Is that enough?" "Ruth, you got your daughter back. You got your inheritance. You got control of the foundation. You exposed their crimes to the entire city. You destroyed their reputation and their social standing. What more do you want?" "I want them to understand what they did. They understand. They just don't care. Then I want other people to understand, so this doesn't happen to someone else. That's why you're telling this story." He was right. The story had become bigger than just my personal experience. Journalists had written articles about inheritance fraud, custody manipulation, and charity theft. Legal experts had used our case as an example of how wealthy families could abuse the court system. Social workers had revised their procedures for evaluating custody cases. Nova's story had become a cautionary tale about the dangers of greed and the importance of protecting vulnerable families from predatory relatives. But more than that, it had become a story about the power of patience, strategy, and refusing to accept other people's definitions of who you are and what you deserve. You know what the best part is? I told David during our final meeting about the case. "What's that?" Andrew would be proud. "Not just of how I fought for Nova, but of what the foundation has become." He would be proud of you, Ruth. You became exactly the person he believed you could be. I became the person I needed to be. As I finished the board meeting and packed up Nova's toys, I thought about the woman I'd been 18 months ago, the grieving widow who'd believed in fairness and justice and the goodness of people. The woman who'd trusted that family meant something beyond blood and money. That woman was gone, and I didn't miss her. In her place was someone stronger, smarter, and more strategic. Someone who understood that sometimes you have to create your own justice. Someone who knew that patience isn't weakness, it's power. Someone who would never again let anyone underestimate her. "Mama, we go home now?" Nova asked, tugging on my hand. "Yes, baby. We're going home." As we walked out of the foundation building together, Nova chattering about the blocks she'd been playing with and the cookies she wanted for lunch, I realized something important. This wasn't the end of our story. It was the beginning. We had a foundation to run, a family to build, and a future to create. We had resources, purpose, and the kind of love that couldn't be bought or stolen or manipulated. And if anyone ever tried to hurt us again, they'd discover what the Myers family had learned the hard way. Sometimes the person you underestimate is the most dangerous person in the room. But more importantly, sometimes the person you underestimate is exactly the person who's going to change the world. And that's exactly what Nova and I were going to do. Together. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that you're stronger than you think and more powerful than anyone who's trying to diminish you, then share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that like button if you believe that justice isn't something that happens to you. It's something you make happen. And subscribe because there are more stories like this one. Stories about people who refused to stay down, who fought back against impossible odds, and who proved that sometimes the best revenge is living well and lifting others up along the way. The world is full of people who think money is power, who believe that cruelty is strength, who assume that kindness is weakness. They're wrong about all of it. Real power is knowing who you are and what you're worth, regardless of what anyone else thinks. Real strength is protecting the people you love, no matter what it costs you.